really is a trove of information that could possibly change the trajectory of this investigation. And, you know, we at Daily Mail posted some photos not too long ago, exclusive photos of the second floor into the house. And I think that does something similar. The purpose of releasing these things are so that not only the investigators, but the people who are from that area, know that area, been in that house, have been in this park, could look at something and say, that doesn't look right, that piques my interest, and contact investigators. The public's viewing of these things is integral to solving this case.
Well, I mean, I would.
Hey guys, so it's been 3 weeks since I covered the Idaho student murders, and it's quite crazy that 3 weeks later there's been a sort of a U-turn to some extent in what has happened. For example, we're seeing headlines like this one. Idaho police say individuals cleared as suspects may be re-interviewed. Right, that came out 4 hours ago, I think. Came out not long ago. There's also this headline. Shall I put this in chat so you guys can read it? There's also this headline: Idaho cops will re-enter home to collect their belongings and return them to their parents. As fears grow, case will turn cold. Do any of you guys have a fear that the case will turn cold? I must say, I don't have that fear. I'm not worried that the case is going to turn cold. And then there's also this headline: the killer behind the Idaho student slayings likely left DNA behind, but the College House crime scene could complicate the investigation, meaning the friends that came over and the time between when the crime was committed and when the law enforcement arrived, there could be quite a lot of contamination. And so the key in terms of the DNA is mixed DNA. And you have mixed DNA samples coming up in several other high-profile cases, the murder of Meredith Kircher, Henry van Breda, and so on. We will get to that in a moment. Okay, hi guys. Let me quickly greet you guys. Marlene Stewart, Mary Williamson, Sharon Drury, good to see you. These Wolves of Eyes. Caroline, welcome to all the new subscribers. So Koi Cat, good to see you. Gal CG. Timmy's actually a little bit injured. He was running next to me while I was mountain biking and sprinting, obviously, and the pads of his 1 foot sort of, I think, wore through cycle. We stood on a stone. So actually, you know, he was a little bleeding a little bit. So a little bit concerned about him. But anyway, lots of R&R in store for him. So good to see you guys. I kind of want to keep this show quite tight because the power is supposed to go out here in about 90 minutes. So I kind of need to get through what I need to get through with you guys before 10 p.m. my time. So let's kind of get going with that. SM Kovalinsky, good to see you. Thanks a lot for the things that you've been sending through. Thanks a lot. Teresa, good to see you as well. Lisa Stokes says, law enforcement is fine. No matter what they do, they will be criticized. Does seem like that. Leanne Davis, good to see you. Christine says, why is the power going out? Because of bad governance. That's all. Okay, Caroline says, looking forward to hearing your insights. So let's kind of deal with that. If I'd had more time, I would have loved to just sort of luxuriate with you guys, share some insights I've had while I was on the road, but maybe we'll touch on that briefly. This is an image of me taken this morning at 4 o'clock this morning. This was me writing the script. That's me in my hotel room. There is Timmy. There's the sea behind me. And there's the script that I was preparing. So there's a kind of a cup of coffee. I'm really tired because when I wrote that, I was many, many, many miles away from where I am now, and I'm feeling just pretty tired. So I've actually got a can of Red Bull here, which I'm going to pour for myself when my energy levels run down a little bit. But let me bring myself back. So I'm obviously coming into this somewhat fresh. I was certainly fresh when I wrote this. I'm not so fresh now that I'm going to narrate it. But this TCRS assessment is essentially my overview of the case, having not really covered it on YouTube for about 3 weeks, right? And maybe that helps. Maybe it helps coming to it. It's not as though I haven't paid attention to it, but I certainly haven't been immersed in it. And does that help you in terms of having an overview? So what we're going to do in this analysis is touch on 7 separate touchstones that are current and newsworthy, right? Although I have been on holiday, and by the way, I typed that script, or the script that I'm reading out now, while on holiday, with the sea shushing over my shoulders. What I did do was I kind of went on a diet of social media. So I kind of made sure that I wasn't influenced by what a lot of people were saying about this case. I did check in each day to check with the news and 1 or 2 channels that I respect, and we're going to touch on one of those first. So this live is a distillation of some of those thoughts as well as a few new ones. I think one obvious question at this stage is, has our thinking on potential suspects changed over the course of 3 weeks? So I'm going to put that question in chat. Hey, Terry Dean, good to see you. Let me just change it to suspects. Suspects, okay. Has our thinking on potential suspects changed over the course of 3 weeks? Zoe says mine hasn't. Okay, let me take that away. What do you guys say? Holly Hyatt says yes. Lauren says not here. The Songbirds is not much for me. I see there are a couple of no's, couple of yeses. Azza says yes. Paula Buck says yes. Sasha, yes. Dave says not for me. Thanks a lot, Renee Mitchell. So you can imagine if your thinking has changed, and I've got to admit that my thinking has definitely been modified, then why should law enforcement sort of come out right in the beginning and say, this is what we think, when it's possible their thinking could change as well? So for those of you who said your thinking's changed, can you understand why it's a little bit difficult and dangerous for law enforcement to pin their colors to a mast? They could say, you know what, we are actually leaning towards this particular suspect. Well, that person, if that person's innocent, could sue them, right? So you can't just willy-nilly think at somebody, share your evidence even, and if you can't prove it, you could be sued, right? Does that make sense? So some of us have changed our minds in the last 3 weeks, and why could that not be the case with law enforcement? Law enforcement are already talking in these articles about re-interviewing some of these people, right? Even though they were cleared, they might be re-interviewed. Does that make sense what I'm saying? Okay. So if you're thinking about potential suspects has changed, how has it changed? Why has it changed? We're going to come back to this question at the end of the discussion. So if your thinking has changed, or even if it hasn't, we're going to come back to this issue and address it at the end of this discussion. If I don't, if we get to around about 90 minutes and I haven't returned to it, please remind me. So for now, slide that card with a question on it into your back pocket. Now we're going to start with the first of these 7 touchstones, and the first one is Gray's root, right? So Gray Investigates put up a video yesterday showing a great 3D sort of blueprint of the house, and took us through what he thought is the killer's route, right? Through 1122 King Road, right? And so that was something that I noticed, and that's the first thing that I kind of want to touch on. If you didn't watch it, let me put the link. I'm sure most of you did watch it. I'm not going to play it here. I'm sure Gray Hughes wants you guys to go to his channel and watch it. So I'll put the link here for you guys if you haven't watched it. But basically, the point is,
What?
it's playing in the background now. Sorry about that. So the point is, even in the 3D animation that he did you notice how much we've sort of learned, right? How much clearer the inside of the house is. In the beginning, we had a very basic idea. Now we're even having 3D animation, and it's quite fluid, right? We've got a very clear idea who was where. We've got a better idea that there were 2 victims in one room and 2 victims in another room, and quite a clear idea of which rooms those were, right? Is there anyone here who disagrees with that? Is there anyone who's like, no, I don't know where it was? If you'd not watched Gray uses 3D animation. So I want to show you guys a screen grab that I took from that video. It's over here, right? Maybe I should do it like that. And that's really all I want to highlight is this comment. Someone said, I think the killer went upstairs first, then ran into Ethan on the way out, right? I tend to agree with that. I don't know what you guys think. I tend to agree that the killer went upstairs first. Gray Hughes presented it as going to the, I think Ethan's room first. And I believe that he went upstairs first. What do you guys say? Okay, Kelly Sharp. Okay. So that's the first point that I kind of want to make, is that 3 weeks later, one area where I haven't really changed my thinking is that the killer went upstairs. The killer was targeting essentially either one or both of the girls, right? Okay. So let me just do this. Okay. So as I say, I agree with this comment from Kay. I think the killer went upstairs first, then ran into Ethan on the way out. Zaina had defensive wounds because she was attacked last. That's in my opinion. But it's likely, I think, that Ethan and Kaylee may have had defensive wounds too. So one departure I've had is that I think the killer entered and exited through the sliding door. I don't know if you guys remember, I originally thought it was through the front door because it was explicitly reported very early on that the front door was wide open, right? But now I think mostly because the sliding door entrance and exit faces away from the street, and if it's a targeted attack, which I believe it was, then there was no point going downstairs, all the way downstairs. It may be, as Gray Hughes says, that the survivors simply didn't wake up, and that's why they survived, and Ethan and Xana did not. So the reason Ethan and Xana died may simply be because they woke up. They weren't targeted. It wasn't 4 were selected out of 6. I think it was really 1 or 2 were selected out of 6, and 2 were collateral damage or collateral casualties. Now, I think what's very important to do if you were law enforcement is I think you need to branch your investigation into basically 2 or 3 areas. The one is where you say, were the couple, were Xana and Ethan targeted? If so, let's investigate that angle. So then you go and look at where were they, who were their friends, what's particular and peculiar to them. In other words, that's one angle that you take, right? And I think it's important to take that angle, even if it's to exclude that possibility, but also just to gather context, gather information. The other angle, which I believe is a legitimate line of inquiry, the legitimate line of inquiry is Kaylee and Maddie. Who did they know? Who did they see? Who was triggered by them? What is in that context? But do you see what I'm saying? You need to have 2 parallel lines of investigation, one dealing with those 2 individuals, another one dealing with those 2 individuals. And then I think you need a third area, which is one that doesn't have any particular bias, where you simply say, let's look at the fabric of this town. Let's look at weirdos in this town. Let's look at strange behavior in this town. Let's look at seemingly random incidents, like the guy that appeared with a knife, like the dog that was skinned, all of that stuff. Let's look at that and try and establish a pattern which is almost divorced from trying to link the 2. Does that make sense? Now, I wanted to sort of talk about this in a lot more detail than I am now, so I'm going to kind of rush through this. Yesterday, around about this time, I was rushing back to my resort over a dirt road, and the epiphany I had was driving at night over a dirt road is in a way a lot easier than driving in the day. And the reason is your headlights shine over the terrain, and in the daytime, the subtleties of the potholes and the ditches are quite hard to discern because it's all the same color. But at night, with a light shining over it, it's much easier to see holes and sort of subtleties in the road, right? In the same way, when you apply that perspective where you say, we're going to look at this case through the viewpoint of this couple, and who did they know, and who was in their friendship circle, and all of that kind of thing. That is, in a way, like shining a light. It's getting a particular perspective from that particular vantage point. So that's one way of shining a light. Another way is looking at it from Xana and Kaylee's, that perspective, and as many perspectives as you can really get. But what I'm trying to say is, just looking at it like in the plain light of day can actually be harder to see the nuances than by taking some of the information away, by taking some of the noise and the brightness of what you're seeing away, and actually reduce what you're seeing. That helps you to see, can help you to see things better. Okay, I'm going to talk about this analogy of a dirt road quite a lot. I've really had quite a few epiphanies in that area. Why is true crime like a dirt road? So I'll come back to that. So besides this, the killer, I think, entering and exiting through the sliding door, what is the story about the front door being wide open? Why was the front door wide open? So even if you choose, if you say, I'm going to focus on that particular theory, well, can you explain why the front door was wide open? Right? Why was the front door wide open? I mean, that may be how police or one of the friends described it. It's still somewhat mysterious where or how or if the front door fits in. Maybe it does, and the killer doesn't behave sensibly. You know, maybe it does make sense. Maybe it does fit in a certain way. But it could also be that maybe the killer didn't behave as sensibly or efficiently as he could have, right? That's something we often do in true crime. We try and explain things in a way that's rational and makes sense. But sometimes criminals don't behave entirely rationally, as we saw in the Delphi case, as we saw in the way that he entered and exited the scene. It's not completely rational. The fact that he held on to, ostensibly, allegedly, held on to his firearm and clothing, you wouldn't really expect. You would actually expect that he buried it somewhere or threw it away, but he didn't, right? That's a good point. I mean, to me, one of the big problems in true crime and in the law is people make ambiguous statements, and it just ends up being more confusing. Just speak simply and be clear about what you're saying. Don't leave things open to interpretation. Okay, so let's go on to the second point. And I want to kind of try to tread carefully around this particular point. Do you guys agree that the hoodie guy rumors are back? Do you guys agree with that? Paula Buck says the front door was left ajar, I believe. Paula Buckle says, where's that comment? We don't know that he didn't discard the knife or burned his clothing. I think we do know that he didn't burn his clothing. You're right, we don't know for a fact that he didn't discard the knife. We're talking about the Delphi case here. In the Idaho case, we certainly don't know either of the answers there, so we shouldn't get confused there. Is any clothing burned? What did they check the dumpsters? Is a knife discarded? Did they look for that? Did they look in? Are there any water sources, rivers or whatever? Have they looked there? Okay. Okay, so do you guys agree that the hoodie guy rumors are back? Like after 3 weeks, the hoodie guy rumors are back, which is why you've got headlines like that. Idaho police say individuals cleared may be re-interviewed. And there's a reference to a man seen with 2 of the victims at a food truck. Well, they're going to apparently be re-interviewed. Well, where is that man? Where is that man to be re-interviewed? What's also happened is the families have grown increasingly vocal in frustration with investigators. Is that fair? Is that fair? We're going to get to that in a moment. Okay. Stephanie, good to see you. I know I did come on a little bit earlier than I thought I would. Okay, so you may remember that I mentioned hoodie guy right off the bat, and I think it's fair to say that suspicion has since swirled elsewhere, and then it sort of boomeranged back to hoodie guy. I do know hoodie guy's name, and I've seen probably the same pictures of him that you've seen, and what he's doing in those pictures. But even if there is a strong presumption of guilt or reason for suspicion, the presumption of innocence is a legal issue, and we need to apply it just as LE do. I'm going to repeat that. I know hoodie guy's name, and I've probably seen the same pictures of him that you have seen, but even if there's a strong presumption of guilt or reason for suspicion, the presumption of innocence is a legal issue as well, and we need to apply it just as Ali does. Now, I think many of you will object to that and say, why should we? Why should social media presume someone innocent? Isn't it social media's job to presume people guilty? Well, that's what I call doing a witch hunt. And that's not what we do at this channel. So I'm not going to be mentioning Hoodie Guy's name. I'm not going to really be showing his photo. We're going to presume that he's innocent, but we're nevertheless going to look at where we are, right? Okay. We're not going to turn every suspect into a witch hunt. Oh, sorry, you made a mistake. Let's go on to the next one. This guy is definitely guilty. Oh, no, hang on. Let's go on to the next one. We're not going to be doing that, right? It's actually illegal, right? You're denying, you're victimizing people. We're not going to be doing that. We want to carefully investigate, and we want to respect the process, just like Ali are, right? So you'll notice I'm not going to refer to Hoodie Guy by name, even though I know his name. I'm not going to show his face, even though I could if I wanted to. There are a few new rumors circulating around Hoodie Guy related to where he is, whether he's in the USA, where he lives, where he lived relative to 1122, which frat he did or didn't belong to, his family status and connections, and some of his hobbies. I'm not really going to repeat or refer directly to any of that stuff. I'm not going to go into any of that except to say that in a symbolic sense, that is exactly the sort of profile you're looking for. You're looking for a spoiled, entitled, but emasculated man boy. So I don't know whether this speculation is accurate, but the what's the word? Where it's coming from is nevertheless to some extent based on, I don't want to say the truth, but it's somewhat accurate. In other words, you can see a motive in a spoiled, entitled, but emasculated man boy. So in other words, someone who's spoiled and entitled expects to get what he wants. And then when he doesn't get it, he might act out in an angry way more than somebody else, right? The difference between someone who's incredibly spoiled and somebody else is someone who's incredibly spoiled expects certain things, and when they don't happen, gets really angry because they're used to getting what they want. Someone who's not spoiled, someone who's sort of more a regular person, someone who's sort of a more of an average person, is kind of a bit more used to not getting what they want. Or they are just part of normal society. Their expectations are kind of normal. And if they don't get things their way, their response is also kind of normal, right? Also, someone with obvious tendencies to shock or get attention tends to be someone who's sort of spoiled kind of thing. I don't know why Richard Branson is in my mind, Elon Musk to some extent as well, but sometimes very wealthy people in a way cheat to get attention. They sort of do shocking things. But it's not really a proper way to get attention. But we are maybe thinking about, in terms of our suspect, maybe it's someone who's used to getting what he wants in one sense, but then also getting away with what he doesn't want in another sense, right? And I want you to think specifically of Elliot Rodger. If I say Elliot Rodger, do you know who I'm talking about? Let me bring him up. I also wish I had more time to go through some of these intertextualities. But this is a picture of Elliot Rodger, right? Can I open that as an image? Right? Let's do it like this. So there's a picture of Elliot Rodger. Do you think that he's a spoiled kid? Do you think he's an entitled kid? Does he look spoiled? Does he look entitled? Is he someone who you would imagine, just based on appearances, expects to get what he wants because he's been spoiled? And is he also someone who, when he doesn't get what he wants, can be very upset? And also, is he used to getting away with things because he's spoiled, right? Does he live in a different world? And so the question is, are we dealing with a kind of Elliot Rodger in this case? And that's another issue I want to sort of deal with, is what does the killer look like? And I think we've got to take that in two perspectives. Literally, what does he look like? Like, is he a big dog or a small dog? That's another thing I thought about while I was on holiday, watching my dog play with the big dog. Is he a big dog or a small dog? But also, what does he look like psychologically, right? And I think we are getting a lot closer to that as well. Yeah, okay. Right, so Gray users picked up on another channel that seemed to show Madison shouting at someone. Did you guys catch that? I'll put a link to that in chat if you haven't caught that either. Oh, that video is now unavailable. That video is now private. That's interesting. That's interesting. Okay, I'm not sure what that's all about, but apparently Madison shouted at someone and seemed to be anyway, let me just put it like this. It is being rumored, it is being speculated that Madison said F you to someone shortly before she was murdered. And Hoodie Guy was in that sort of frame, right? And again, I kind of want to say the same thing. And you might say, well, you're being really reckless, you're being really careless, you're not paying any attention to details. And I wouldn't argue with that. What I am going to say is, regardless of whether she was saying something to him or to someone else, you have nevertheless the scenario of someone who's inebriated, someone who's had too much to drink, being kind of ABUSIVE, right? And that may have upset someone. Now, what I'm trying to say is, yeah, you've got a thing caught on camera. And again, it doesn't really matter whether it's true or not. It doesn't matter if it's directed to Hoodie Guy or to another guy, or if that thing you're seeing there is actually irrelevant to what actually happened. What matters is it likely that that night something was said in a state of, what do you call it, uninhibited, in an uninhibited state, to someone who maybe was sober, and that really annoyed them, right? And I think the answer is yes. The answer is that you can say horrible things or silly things, and someone else might get a good laugh out of it, but you may be not very amused by it. Liesel says, Nick, also how Jacks keep trying to hide from cameras. Interesting, okay. Oh, is it a different link? Okay. Well, anyway, the link's gone. So I wanted to share it with you, but I think you know what I'm talking about. So audio from on a different channel, and I thought I could hear Madison saying F you. I thought I could hear that. It also looked like she was giving someone the finger, and it looked like Kaylee was actually recording it, and kind of in a kind of gleeful way, you know, that my drunk friend is really pissed off, and it's actually quite funny, and we're going to laugh about this tomorrow morning. You can imagine if someone's insulting you and her friend is recording it and laughing, that can make it 10 times worse. Some things you shouldn't take personally, but you do, right? Sometimes you do take those things personally. Stephanie says respect for grey. Someone says it was debunked. What was debunked? Oh, there it is. Okay, so thanks a lot, Stephanie, for putting that up. Amanda Elise says, now we are speculating. So, yeah, I mean, there is a certain amount of speculation going on, but I think you'll agree that I'm trying to anchor it in what we know for a fact. I'm not trying to stray. I'm also trying to anchor it to true crime intertextuality. And I want to compare true crime intertextuality to the GPS signal that navigates you when you're traveling. That's what we actually get from law enforcement. We get something like our best route through the fabric of the case, right? And sometimes a GPS signal actually can make mistakes, and it can have devastating effects. You can get totally lost. I got really lost yesterday following GPS, right? At the same time, that GPS can be like a lifesaver. You don't really have to think because it's giving you exactly what you need to do, sometimes in a very fraught situation where there are lots of signals. Law enforcement provide that kind of thing for us, to the true crime community. They provide us with anchor points and milestones and very important information, right? And they only provide that when they feel that they're ready to. But it is literally like allowing us to navigate true crime. And the way that we, if you think law enforcement are a joke or that they're useless, well, try navigating true crime without a GPS, like driving somewhere new that you haven't gone before without a GPS. Some people would say, yes, you should. Rely on your own knowledge. Yes, and you should. But it can be very, very useful what law enforcement tell us. Gingeroo says, why need to anchor it to only the truck, just because that's the only bit of that evening we have? No, it's not just that. The fact is that was very shortly before they died. And as I say, it seems like that's just my opinion, that they were actually targeted, right? So it is very important what they were doing and what they were seen doing and the atmosphere and the vibe shortly before they died. Is there a clue in that footage? And the answer may be yes. It could have nothing to do with anyone else in the footage, just the fact that they aren't sober, or especially Madison isn't sober. Could someone else in that footage be a suspect? Possibly, but also possibly not. It could also have more to do with the text that was sent, but nevertheless, the fabric going on just before the crime is often very, very, very important. Calls that were made, interactions that occurred can be very, very important. Bear in mind, a lot of these students live very close to each other, right? Okay. Do you guys agree that the girls were obviously inebriated and said some things, and possibly even Ethan and Zaina were possibly inebriated as well? Maybe they said something nasty or funny or triggering, and someone took it very, very seriously. And who could that someone be? The other students would probably have a really good idea. The other students, they would probably have the best idea who may have reacted badly to things like that, who was a spoil sport, who was sensitive, right? Who was the Elliot Rodger? I think this is really a key question. Who was the Elliot Rodger of the University of Idaho? Who would many people say was the Elliot Rodger of the University of Idaho? By the way, this isn't beer. It is Red Bull, right? Let me prove it. Otherwise, I'm going to get investigated. Okay, let me try and get through what I'm trying to get through here. In the food stall footage, you see another student flinging her arms around her bow. Did you guys notice that? So you're supposed to not look at her and that guy who's kind of got a beard, I think. You're supposed to look at who's behind them and what's kind of going on there. But if you notice those individuals in the foreground, you see this looks like quite an attractive female student and quite a good looking guy, and they kind of playful with one another. And I think that's just a symptom of what was going on that night. Playfulness, flirting, people enjoying, having drinks together and socializing at the end of the semester. And probably a lot of that is going around. Probably there were a lot of happy people. It was a weekend. Their team had, I think, won their game. Maybe there were a lot of people who were sort of buzzing and on a high, and within that context, maybe there was someone who was stone cold sober, and everyone was happy and getting laid and holding hands and laughing and whatever, but someone wasn't. Someone was stone cold sober and probably realized he wasn't going to get laid, right? So the fact is, even in an innocent until proven guilty scenario, anytime you have someone with opportunity, this is so important. So someone asked earlier, why would you pay attention to food stall guy? Like, let's just cross him off the list. Why would you pay attention to it? Let me tell you why. In the John Benet Ramsey case, 26 years later, there's still suspicion swirling around John Benet's father, John Benet's mother, John Benet's brother. Why? Because all three of them had access and thus opportunity, right? And you have the exact same situation here. All those people in the video that you see, the food stall video, all of these people have access in the sense that they are there, and thus they have the opportunity, right? In other words, their alibi is to some extent diminished because they're there, right? Does that make sense? That's really why it's important. And so you really want to step by step cross each one of those individuals off the list that appear in that video, if only to exclude them, right? You want to be absolutely certain that each one of them have got an alibi. You want to name them and establish where they were and what the dynamics were. And that takes time. So before we get to point number 3, my thinking has changed in that I initially thought Kaylee's Jack was a better candidate at one stage than Hoodie Guy, right? I don't know if you guys agree with this. My initial thinking was that I thought this is quite a personal crime, that it's kind of like an ex-boyfriend, right? That there's a lot of very painful feeling here. And that has now changed to almost an Elliot Rodger type situation, that it's not such a personal thing in terms of the victims. It's very personal for the perpetrator, but it's not that personal in terms of the victims. Thanks a lot, Bridget. Thanks for that. Do you guys agree with this? What are your thoughts? Sorry, I didn't mean to highlight that. Where is it? Do you guys think that the killer who's still on the loose, do you think that the killer is someone who was in a relationship or someone who is basically in a very personal relationship scenario, or do you think it's someone who is more just locked outside of that, someone who's outside of it? What do you think? What do you think? What is sort of gut feel? Let's have a look what you guys say. Kelly says relationship. Eliza says outside. So that's really what you've got to figure out. Was it a close relationship? Was it an outsider? I think the answer is that if you look at the victims, that it's a close friend and then it's also a couple. I think it's an outsider, but within the relationship of the student community. That's just how I see it so far. But I mean, my thinking's evolving. My thinking was also that Kaylee was the likely target, right? It could just as easily be Madison, especially if it's her saying "fuck you" minutes before the murders, right? And you might say, and I saw someone making this comment, I think on Patreon, so, that there's no way that someone would do this and they're just kind of a normal person. Thanks a lot, Les Brown. Thanks for dropping by. Good to see you here. There's no way that someone would just kind of commit this crime. Yeah, but there's a lot that's different from you committing this crime. Someone could have been on drugs. Someone could have expected that at university they're going to have a fairy tale, that they're going to fall in love, that they're going to have fun. And then when that doesn't happen, as it didn't with Elliot Rodger, well, their experience then becomes a nightmare. And then they feel a very strong sense that I don't want you to have your fairy tale because I didn't have mine, right? And so who is the Elliot Rodger of the University of Idaho? And that, to me, is the number 2 clue that we've all missed, is that we're looking for an INCEL type person here. Same basic profile as Elliot Rodger, spoiled, entitled, should be, in his mind, should be having a lot of fun, having an incredible run at university. But people find him snobbish, off-putting, rude, not charming, whatever, right? Full of himself, whatever it is. There's something off-putting about this individual. Maybe he loses temper. Maybe he does unpleasant or shocking things that people have spoken about and won't let him off the hook for, right? So, Nicole, I'm not really going to speculate on those speculations. I have mentioned why already. Okay. Of the 2 girls, what do you guys think of this? Of the 2 girls, which one was more drunk? Let me ask that again. Of the 2 girls that you see in the food stall, which one was the more drunk? Jane says, do you still think the killer will be arrested by Christmas? I think it'll be clear who he is by Christmas. I mean, I think it's already quite clear. Yeah, guys, we're trying not to kind of witch hunt and victimize. So please just refer to him as Hoodie Guy, as we did with Bridge Guy, right? Yeah, so I think everyone's in agreement that Maddie seemed to be from the footage, seemed to be more inebriated. I mean, you can actually see Kaylee recording her, almost like she's amused by how drunk she was, right? Welcome to Emily D, new member. Welcome. Stephanie, do you want me to slow down the chat? I'm just scared I'm going to run out of time if I spend too much time doing that. Stephanie, can you handle the chat, or do you need me to slow down? Please, okay. It's going to take me a little bit of time to do that, but hopefully I can work quickly.
I witnessed something.
Just give me a second. Customize, slow mode, 60 seconds. Hopefully that helps. Okay. So I just think it's a question worth asking. Celeste, welcome as well. It's a question worth asking. If one of these girls, or even one of the 4 that were murdered, was more drunk than any of the others, does that mean anything? Just that question. Does it mean anything? And you could say, no, it doesn't mean anything, but maybe it does. Well, does it or doesn't it? Well, on the one hand, it could mean something because maybe someone how can I put it? Maybe someone thought someone was easy meat, easy pickings in terms of in a sexual sense. Maybe someone thought, maybe someone even said, she's easy or whatever, or when she's drunk, she's easy, or maybe someone tried to get someone drunk. And then at the end of the evening, instead of getting some kind of reward, actually got kind of kicked in the teeth. No, I'm not that easy, or whatever it is, right? Terry actually made a really interesting comment. Thanks a lot, Liesel. Thanks for that. Terry actually made a really interesting comment where she said, what if a guy lone, because it was quite a cold night, getting cold, towards the middle of November, doesn't it look like Maddie is wearing a guy's jacket, and maybe a guy was worried about getting his jacket back, and maybe when he wanted it back, or maybe if he thought, well, I'll get it back, I'll walk with you home and get it back, maybe she felt harassed, maybe she kind of wasn't thinking so well, and then anyway, what was that possibly part of the situation, that someone doing a good deed, never a good deed, how does that saying go? Never a good deed goes unpunished, kind of thing. Did someone give her his jacket to keep her warm, but then kind of wanted it back, and then she hurled abuse at him? Again, you might say, but that wouldn't infuriate anyone. It might if he secretly harbored a crush on her and had been for a long time, and then thought, geez, I don't deserve this. And then even her friend is recording her insulting him and laughing. And maybe his house of cards crumbled as a result. Who knows? Yeah, Paula says he was wearing a big men's jacket. So whose jacket was that? Often in true crime, the clothing narrative is also important. What happened to someone's shoes? What happened to, right? All that kind of thing. Right, I really need to rush to get through here. Also, was Madison a lot more drunk than Kaylee, or just a little? Someone might see that. A killer, a criminal might see someone who's very drunk, someone who's obviously drunk, as easy pickings. But it could also be a perfect recipe for uninhibited insulting. Someone who's uninhibited because they're drunk, saying really nasty things, right? Who knows? And I think the law enforcement need to ask these questions. What was Maddie like when she wasn't sober? What was Kaylee like when she wasn't sober? What incidents took place previously with them when they weren't sober? And ask the same thing about Ethan, and I'm sure they have looked at that. Number 3, I'm sure you guys know this. Steve Consalves is hiring a lawyer to pressure Ali. So let me put this up. I'm sure you guys are aware of this. They plan to hire a lawyer amid tensions with police. Okay, now I'm just going to be honest how I feel about this, right? I often feel like the true crime, this is just me being me, and I expect quite a few of you to just head off, unsubscribe. I'm not listening to this kind of thing because it might not be what you want to hear, but this is nevertheless how I feel. I often feel like the true crime community act like little children, spoiled little children, when it comes to high profile cases. They want their true crime candy and they want it just the way they want it. They don't want to wait and they don't want to be told what they can have. And when they are told, okay, this is only going to come in these months or whatever, some of them can throw hissy fits. Social media is in a way a law of its own. It's sort of the Wild West. You can speculate, you can accuse people, you can defame. Actually, it's not right. But I guess it's easy for cowboys to imagine they are the new law in town, the cowboys of social media, the cowboys of true crime, especially taking cues from some true crime creators who think their subscriber numbers make them some sort of online celebrity or true crime god. Sorry to burst your bubble, but how justice works, how prosecutions are handled, not like in one case, in every case, is that there are protocols in every single case, and they are legally prescribed. In every single case, the cops don't say, guys, this is everything we know, have at it, right? Even in the Chris Watts case, how many months did it take for them to hand over the discovery? And they only did that, they only handed over the discovery when the result of the plea deal was a fait accompli, right? So get used to it. Law enforcement are trying to protect the investigation, and our social media, our true crime creators also trying to protect investigation, right? I'm trying to do that. Like, I think when, for example, in the Delphi case, when that one judge said, I'm recusing myself, I thought, wow, YouTube needs to take a step back. There's too much pressure, right? And I think sometimes YouTubers can cause a lot of harm. We actually just saw that with a case that was literally being heard, being postponed because of someone doing something. And I think if you're in true crime, I think you need to take responsibility and say, don't do any more harm that's already been done. How are you helping, right? And I think I asked a question earlier, do you think there's enough pressure on law enforcement? I think the answer is yes. I think there's a heck of a lot of pressure on them. In that poll, you look at the sheer number of media. When they give a press conference, you look at the sheer number of media, and that room is full of people. That's pressure. News stories coming out every single day, that's pressure. The student body, that all the students that aren't coming back next year, that's pressure. Every single day that this case isn't solved or there's not progress, that's pressure. Every day that goes by is pressure. Somebody hiring a lawyer and having tensions with the police and going to the media, that's exerting pressure. That's creating tension. But some tension that's been created is unnecessary. Don't you agree? So one of the things that can take time and has taken time was, for example, the toxicology in terms of the victims, but also getting these mixed DNA samples and getting the DNA evidence. That has taken about 2 or 3 weeks, and I think that's where we are now. I think where we are now is at a crucial phase. That's why you have this headline. Right? Can you guys see that? This is from CNN. It says, investigation enters critical stage, and it mentions here something about as police are starting to receive forensic testing results from the crime scene. So you've got to give them time to get their results, right? They're not just sitting on their thumbs, right? Things are happening. Okay. So just bear in mind, these protocols that law enforcement have got to abide by are legally prescribed. Even if somebody wants to share what they think, they may not. And if somebody really wants to, they may leak it to the press, and that can often jeopardize the integrity of investigation. And it can lead to detectives resigning, like you had in the John Benet Ramsey case. Okay. But just bear in mind, there's no conspiracy here, no government agenda, no boogeyman pulling the strings. Every time in true crime when law enforcement don't tell social media what they want to hear, then they think there's a conspiracy. It's some kind of agenda going on, and it's got to be some kind of conspiracy. No, it's just how investigations are. It's how they were and how they will be conducted. And social media, as we've seen, likes to fill the vacuum that creates law enforcement not saying what they know because they're not sure, because they can't prove it. Well, social media just fill that by saying, well, we don't know this for sure, but we can just snap our fingers and say, well, we don't have to prove it, but we just know it because we believe it. It's become an old, worn-out, dog-eared formula already, and the solution is simple. Law enforcement won't tell the public what's going on. Cue social media telling the public what they want to hear while undermining and ridiculing law enforcement. In this case, we do need to be patient, not as patient as 5 years in the Delphi case, but authorities do need to act urgently. And that's why I do think we are going to see results probably in the next 3 weeks before Christmas. Or is that 2 weeks? Within the next 2 weeks. We already know that around 25% to 40% of students don't seem to intend to return to the University of Idaho in 2023. That's already additional pressure, right? Yeah, I mean, that's a good point. It's a good point. So they're probably getting a lot of pressure from the university, economically. Besides justice issues, there are economic and social imperatives for solving this case. It's in the national spotlight. But even throwing an army of agents doesn't change the underlying legalities. Innocent until you can prove someone is guilty. Do you guys follow what I'm saying there? The basic psychology, the basic methodology of law enforcement is they treat someone as innocent until they can prove someone is guilty. So they may actually have a suspect and they're gathering evidence, and the moment that they can prove that that suspect is guilty, then they'll say, this is the suspect and we will name him. But they won't do that until they can. Otherwise, they make themselves targets for a lawsuit. So that proof, as I say, is likely to come from mixed DNA samples. We saw mixed DNA samples in the Meredith Kircher case, Jodi Arias, and the Henry van Breda case. I would have loved to taken you guys through some of these stories which deal with mixed DNA. I wrote 4 or 5 books on the Henry van Breda case. So I really did go into this. Henry van Breda was an ex-murderer, and he murdered his family. So what is going on here? Is this the murder of strangers, or is it the murder of family? And that's where you sort of come back to Elliot Rodger, because there is a family, there's a community of sorts in terms of students. So I'll put these links in chat. but they talk about mixed DNA. So Henry's story was that some intruder came into the house and he didn't commit the crimes, some intruder did, but then they couldn't find any DNA. They couldn't find any foreign DNA. So DNA is probably going to be a very important issue in this case. It's very hard to imagine the killer using a knife with hand-to-hand sort of combat, someone having defensive wounds, killing 4 times, didn't leave behind DNA. It's very hard to believe that he didn't. But what we're looking for is mixed DNA. So let me try and quickly get through this. I've cycled from thinking Madison was the primary target. I don't know about you guys. So I first thought that Madison was the primary target, then to Kaylee, then back to Madison. Madison made sense to me simply because, to me, she's the most attractive female in the house. Do you guys agree with that, or do you think that that's wrong, or just, I don't know, what do you guys think? Right? I thought, to me, she's the most attractive female in the house, so weren't there other guys, other students that also found her attractive, that were pursuing her? Bear in mind, her boyfriend is not at university. So is she available? Dave says, I would say Kaylee. Well, to me, I thought Madison was the most attractive. But the point is, what did the killer think, right? And then I thought the killer was possibly infatuated the most with her. Madison also made sense because she seems to be the one swearing at someone. So someone was giving her unwanted attention, I guess. Also, did somebody try to get her drunk? Right? Was somebody trying to get Madison drunk? It's not irrelevant to ask who is more attractive, and it's not victim blaming or anything. It's not being superficial. It is, what did the killer think? What was going on in the killer's chemicals, in his psychology? What was going on, right? But the point is that I first thought it was Madison, and I actually didn't want to say why I thought it was her, and that was the reason. Now I'm telling you what the reason is, but now I'm also telling you, I then thought, no, it's not Madison, it's Kaylee, right? Something else to note is we get to know Kaylee's personality to some extent through her family. Have you noticed that? You kind of get a sense of Kaylee through her social media, through what some of her friends say, through some of her comments, through what she says on Twitter as well. That's also quite interesting. But do you notice that her father is a love him or hate him kind of person? Do you kind of get that sense that Kaylee's dad is a kind of, you like him or you don't kind of guy? He either rubs you the right way or he rubs you the wrong way, right? Hocus Pocus says the girls downstairs are more attractive. That's not really what we're trying to look at. It is of the victims who is the most attractive. I don't know whether there's a mental block if you're a woman saying, I don't like the superficial argument you're having. Maybe you need to be a guy to understand if the killer's a guy and there's a sexual component to the crime, then there's a issue of, I find you attractive, but you don't find me attractive. That's what you're trying to get at. And I think maybe as a woman, you say, I don't like the fact that men look at women and it's so superficial. Yeah, but it's not about you. It's about the crime. It's about the criminal psychology, right? That's what it's about. That's why, in the same way, people think it's so objectionable comparing how attractive Shanann Watts was to Nicole Kessinger. No. Nicole Kessinger is far less attractive. Yeah, but that's not the point. What did Chris Watts think? To Chris Watts, who is more attractive? And again, you might say, yeah, I'm not interested in talking about that, but that's the criminal psychology. That's what the criminal's thinking, and that's the kind of thinking you need to shine your light over the gravel road to see, right? It's not about what you think, it's about what they think, right? And to some extent, maybe what you think is what they think, but maybe it's not. I'm glad you understand, Susan. Okay. So if you think about Kaylee's dad, I wonder whether, I don't know this, I might be totally off when I say this, but if Kaylee's father's a love him or hate him character, was Kaylee as well, right? And you might say that's a terrible thing to say, but what I'm trying to get at is, if you were friendly with Kaylee, did you love her? I'm sure you did. But what if you weren't? If you weren't in her good books, or if you weren't part of that, what was that like? And if you go and look at her Twitter, you kind of get a sense that there's a little bit of contempt for boys, which you often have with beautiful girls. When is this guy going to get the message? I'm not interested. But there's kind of a contempt with it, right? And sometimes you can be sweetly rejecting and contemptuous, but sometimes not. All I'm trying to say is you can kind of maybe get a sense of these victims also through their family members when you see them speaking at the vigil. I think you get a sense of Kaylee through her dad. I think you get, if you think about the Chris Watts case, you get a sense of Shanann through her brother, mother, and father. I think the same can be said for other family members who have spoken on behalf of their murdered progeny. I think there's also this other possibility. It's possible the killer didn't target Maddie or Kaylee or Maddie, but both girls. Maybe the killer felt humiliated by both of them. Maybe he didn't target one or the other, but he targeted both of them. Maybe they, plural, were the primary targets. Where Maddie seems to be swearing at someone, as I say, Kaylee records footage of that moment. She seems to be laughing or entertained by it. All of that would be wounding to the rejected entity, not just being scorned, but someone else gleefully recording it. And I wonder if Ali had that final recording. I wonder if Ali actually had that recording from her phone. You would imagine that they would. So I think a lot of the time when I do this analysis, people say, that offends me, I'm insulted by that. That's really a horrible thing to say. But the point isn't what I think or what you think or what your position is. It's the criminal psychology. That's what you're trying to probe. And obviously the criminal psychology is distasteful. It's criminal. It's someone who's thinking in a predatory, very black and white way. So yeah, it is distasteful, but we're trying to fathom what it is. We're trying to go into those dark places. We're trying to shine a light and see what silhouettes come out of it, right? Holly Golightly says, why doesn't anyone think Ethan was the target? There is someone who thinks Ethan was the target. Let me see if I can play quickly what I said about that. See if I can find it. I'm running out of time, really running out of time. You know, Terry, I was sort of thinking about trying to balance my holiday with... Terry, I appreciate your difference of opinion, because certainly there is some merit to Ethan being the primary target. The thing is, if he was the primary target, why would the killer go upstairs as well, right? And also, why kill him in a house full of people when it was probably would be an easier way? like when he was walking home, right? But yeah, I mean, I appreciate your difference of opinion. So did you get that? If Ethan's the primary target and Ethan didn't even live in that house, why not target him when he was walking by himself? If he's the target. Deborah, thanks very much for that. Okay. I really need to wrap up. I've got like 15 minutes. If the screen goes blank, it's because the power's gone out. Okay, so now we're going to deal with what does the killer look like? That's number 4. Well, I think there you've got to think about not just his physical appearance, but his psychological appearance. We've spoken about that briefly. I think I'm going to skip this part. We'll deal with it in a separate episode or live stream. We're going to deal with what does the killer look like. And I think you've also got to think, how was he defective? Was he defective because he was small? Was he defective because he lacked social skills? Was he defective because he was small and lacked social skills? What was his problem based on someone else? So if you saying, I thought, between the girls, I thought that girl was more attractive, whatever. Okay, that's one argument. What was wrong with the killer? Why was he not measuring up for whatever reason? That's the other way that you think about it. What was his hang up, or what was the hang up of the community about him? So I've kind of dealt with this, but I'm going to come back to it. Social media behaving badly. Does true crime know that police have protocols? I did touch on that. So if you do know that, why do we keep cycling to the same crap? We had it in the Rodney case, the Chris Watts case, the Morphew case. These days, it's every case. People, the court where justice happens isn't the court of public opinion, it's the courtroom. And we need to respect the fact that social media, we aren't detectives, right? There may be people qualified, there may be experts, but the detectives who know the most aren't on social media, and they will provide information when they think it's right. And that is the frustrating part of true crime, is that you only know everything in the rearview mirror. While it's happening, you don't know. They know, but they are legally prevented from telling us. And there's no conspiracy. It's the way it works, and that's the way it's going to work in every single case. And it's not, it shouldn't be a surprise. Thanks a lot, Raw Olympia. Okay. Number 6, is the killer a family member, an ex, a boyfriend, or none of these? So I'm almost done, and I've got about 10 minutes. What do you guys think? So don't laugh, but a so-called expert, sort of someone who's sort of an expert that is often interviewed, has already pontificated whether Kaylee's father is the killer. Have you guys seen that? Is Kaylee's father the killer? Well, if Kaylee's father was in town, I think we'd know about it. Anyway, that is the number 2 clue we all missed. That's my opinion, is that the killer, I don't think it's a family member. I don't think it's an ex. I don't think it's a current boyfriend. I think it's none of those. I think it's an INCEL, right? I'm going to talk to you guys about these analogies these kind of epiphanies I had while I was on holiday in a separate live. I'm just running out of time now. Why law enforcement is like GPS. Why true crime is like a dirt road in terms of true crime psychology, criminal psychology. Why ordinary psychology is like driving on a normal tar road, but you can't translate that. You can't drive the way you drive on a tar road on a dirt road. You can't drive the same way, and you kind of need a better vehicle and a different technique. You don't just apply the same thing willy-nilly. I want to talk about that in a separate episode. Yeah, I agree with that. To actually have an expert saying that the father could be the killer, it starts to achieve like a circus aspect to it. The final thing that I want to mention, this is a photo from my my holiday. Final thing I want to mention is getting lost is easy. In true crime, getting lost is easy. And that is why we need true crime intertextuality. It's the kind of GPS that we use when we don't have insight from law enforcement. So when law enforcement, while they are investigating, when they can't tell us what happened, we can refer to the well-worn path of other cases, right? And obviously you need to be a professional, you need to know these other cases really, really well. And I've written lots of books about them. You can use true crime intertextuality as a key that basically works as a kind of GPS. It guides you into a new case using certain patterns from old cases. And that's what I'm going to be doing with you guys over the next couple of days, right? Somebody said I've got very big feet. Actually, I've got very small feet. It's just, I guess, how the photo was taken. So think about that. I want to, just end off by saying true crime requires effort. And if you think about a beach that is hemmed in by rocks on both sides, what you carry with you is your burden, but there is a path. And I experienced this while I was mountain biking on the beach, and then it got so hard to get to through the rocky sections on either side. And the fact is, there's a path there. True crime works the same way. There are parts of true crime that are very easy to navigate. It's very obvious, kind of what's going on, right? Why am I out of focus now? It's very obvious what's going on, but then you get the rocky sections where it's not obvious. But there is a path, and that path is the fact that reality did take place. You just got to find your way to it. But the more you carry shit with you, the more you're not going to find that path. The more you are biased and distracted and I don't know, taking all sorts of things with you, the more you've got the wrong perspective, the more you are weighed down by other things, the harder it's going to be to go through those rocky areas between the beaches, right? If that doesn't make sense, what I've just said, I'll explain it to you in a bit more detail. But I did feel like I had a couple of really interesting epiphanies, just in broad strokes, how to deal with true crime, how to think about true crime more effectively. So I hope what it doesn't, Hash, it doesn't really mean that. It means he can't get the attention and the responses that he wants. That's actually what it means. I've written 2 books about that, so I have sort of touched on it. Another thing, just quickly, driving on a dirt road requires so much concentration compared to a tar road. So the true crime journey requires attention to detail, requires effort and concentration. You can't be reckless. There are consequences to that. Anyway, we'll deal with that. Yeah, they've got very little agency. So I'm sorry that I had to rush through this. I'm around about out of time. I just want to thank all of you for being here. I hope you found this worthwhile after 3 weeks. As I say, my thought process has changed. I'm sure Ali's has changed as well. But the law doesn't forgive that kind of thing. The law doesn't forgive you saying, I think that this person's a suspect. Oh, sorry, I've changed my mind. Well, sorry, you've got a lawsuit on your hands, right? And that's what I don't know whether Kaylee's father understands that. Is that law enforcement are legally precluded from being completely open cards with what's going on. anyway, I expect we are going to see big developments within the next 2 weeks. It would have taken about this time for the forensics to come back, the DNA tests, and to some extent the toxicology. Yeah. Okay, so that's it from my side. I think my screen's going to go black at any moment. Thanks a lot, everyone, for joining me. I've got a couple more videos from my trip to upload, but I am going to be hitting the Idaho case repeatedly over the next couple of days. Quite a lot to talk about, quite a few angles that I feel need to be, you know, fleshed out and dealt with. So I've sort of highlighted a lot of the basics in this one. I do want to deal with what the family members said at the vigil, and what that in a way tells us about the victims. Sherry Parr says, I don't have a suspect yet. Anthea, thanks a lot. Whoa, Christmas Beetle. Okay, guys, thanks a lot for joining me here. Thanks, mods. Thanks for all the new members. Welcome to all the new subscribers, and thanks a lot for those super chats. Take care, guys, and I'll see you guys next time.